Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today we are making butternut squash soup. This recipe could not be more perfect for fall weather. This is a light and creamy soup, and it uses some spices that I typically use in my fall baking, but that you don't find in savory recipes so often. We're going to jump right into it by preheating our oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Now let's talk squash. You are going to need about 3 pounds of butternut squash for today's recipe. This squash is actually quite a bit larger. It's a little bit closer to 5 pounds, so I won't be using all of it. My husband actually grew this in our own garden, so I am pretty proud of it, excited to be eating it. Now let's go ahead and chop this up because we're going to need to peel it and cube it because we will be roasting it before we put it in our soup. This is going to help bring out some really nice flavors. There are a couple ways you can go about peeling a squash. You can use a peeler and just peel it, or you can just cut it in half and start trimming off the skin before you dice it. Since I have more squash than I need today, I think that's the route I'm going to take. Just think it'll save a little bit of time. Now, squash can be pretty tricky to cut. I'll usually cut off the end and make sure you use a sharp knife. Cut off the bottom end, cut off the top end. Cut that a little further up. And I'll cut it in half, which again, be careful, use a sharp knife, just sort of sawing through. Ideally, you would try to cut as straight as possible. That way you can stand the squash straight up. But if you've ever seen me cut like a pan of brownies, you know I'm not the best at making even cuts. All right, all the scraps will go to my chickens. Now I'll just trim off the edges. Just trim off those last bits of skin or peel remaining. Not too shabby. Now, in the bottom half of the squash, you're going to have a whole bunch of seeds. This half I'm going to save for later. It's just more than I need in my soup. These seeds and pulp here, we're not going to put in our squash. We're going to scrape these out. You could roast these seeds if you wanted, just like pumpkin seeds. I am going to also be giving these to my chickens. All right, now we're going to go ahead and dice this squash. You're going to want about 1-inch pieces, but the important thing is really just that you dice all of the squash into pieces that are about the same size, that way they roast evenly. I'm also not super great at doing that, so this is one of those do as I say, not as I do things. And as we cut our squash, we're just going to drop this onto a roasting pan. All right, now there is another ingredient I like to roast with my squash, and that's a little bit of sweet potato. I tried throwing a couple different ingredients in this soup, including apple, which is a popular addition to butternut squash soup, and I really didn't like any of them except for a sweet potato. So we're going to add about 1/2 pound of sweet potato. We'll peel this first real fast. And I'm going to cut this up into pieces the same size as the squash, so it'll roast evenly with the squash. Now you'll notice we will also be prepping some onion and garlic while the squash and sweet potato are roasting in the oven. It was a conscious decision to not roast the onion and the garlic with the squash and the sweet potato. This is just how I prefer it. Let's chop this baby up. Sweet potato scraps usually go to my dogs instead of the chickens. And again, aim for pieces the same size as your squash. And again, one thing I'm really bad at doing is getting uniform pieces. But everything always works out in the end. Such is life, right? You didn't know you were getting words of wisdom from YouTube today. No idea butternut squash soup would make me so insightful. Before this goes into the oven, I'm going to drizzle it with some olive oil. And I'm going to season it with some salt and a little bit of freshly cracked black pepper too. I don't go crazy with the black pepper. Let's stir this up so all of the squash and sweet potato gets tossed in a little bit of that oil. Now try to space your squash and potato so that it's not super crowded on the pan. If you have a bigger pan than I do, even better. We're going to take this over to our oven. It should be at 425 degrees Fahrenheit now, and we're going to roast it until these veggies are tender when pierced with a fork. That's usually about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if your pieces are a little larger like mine are. We get this in the oven. All right, while those are in the oven, let's prep a couple of other ingredients that we need today. Starting with 1 medium yellow onion. Just going to dice this up. Or dice it, I guess I should say. My mother always told me not to end my sentences with prepositions. All right, I'm gonna try not to cry while I do this. Oh gosh, here I am getting emotional about an onion again. All right, we'll set this aside. This is like a heaping cup of onion. I'm gonna cover it up because it's making me cry. Now let's prep our garlic. You're going to need about a tablespoon of garlic for today's recipe. Let's peel that first. Sorry, I'm so emotional. Now, how many cloves you'll need to get to a tablespoon completely depends on the size of your cloves. I don't like to say a number of cloves. I mean, we've all had the cloves that are like teeny tiny and then the elephant ear sized ones. That could be enough, but we're gonna go 1 more for good measure. No such thing as too much garlic, right? All right, go ahead and give this a nice mince. All right, now we just need a little bit of patience to wait for our squash to finish cooking, and then I'll see you over at my stovetop. Your squash and sweet potatoes are ready to go. We are going to add 1/3 cup of salted butter. This is really melty and slippery, excuse me. 1/3 cup of salted butter, which is 5 1/3 tablespoon, in case you were wondering, to a large pot or Dutch oven. I'm using my cast iron, enameled cast iron soup pot today, and I'm going to turn my stovetop heat to medium. Stir this a little bit to encourage it to melt, but as you can see, it's already pretty melty thanks to my lights today. All right, once our butter is melted and the pot is nice and warm, we'll add our onion. Oops, except for what I just lost there. We'll stir this into the butter and we're going to cook it until the onion is nice and softened. This is going to take about 5 or 6 minutes. All right, once the onion is softened, we'll add our garlic. Get all of that in there. We do not waste garlic around here. Can't get enough garlic around here. Cook that until it's nice and fragrant, which usually takes about 30 seconds. It's amazing how good your kitchen starts smelling when you're just cooking onions and garlic. And once that is nice and fragrant, we'll grab our veggies and we're going to add them to the pot as well. I'm going to try not to make a mess doing this. Probably a better way to do this, but sometimes when I'm on camera, my brain stops working and I get really nervous and I do things in less than practical ways. Or as my sister's saying back there, that's just me not on camera too. So this is just how I am, guys. You're getting the real me. So I'm going to get these mixed in a little bit because I don't want those onions burning, so I'm just gonna stir things a little and then add my spices. We'll start with a ½ teaspoon of table salt. You may need to add more later, but this is where we start. We'll also add a ½ teaspoon of dried thyme, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. Adds a really nice flavor to the soup. 1/8 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and 1/8 teaspoon ground cinnamon. Like I said, these are spices that you might see in gingerbread cookies. Maybe you're used to seeing them in savory recipes, but they're not ingredients I cook with in my savory dishes quite so much. But they work here. They work so well with the squash. They work so well with the season. You're going to love them. So I'm just stirring all of the spices because I want to get them as well distributed as I can across the veggies that we have in our pot. I want to get them warming up with that butter, really help the flavors develop here. It smells so good. All right, next up, broth. You're going to need 4 cups of broth. You can use vegetable broth, which actually would make this a vegetarian dish, or you can use chicken broth. Use whichever you have on hand. Both work really well. I find that the chicken broth adds a little bit more, I want to say like body to the soup, but really both work well. I'm going to slowly stir this in. And then I will bring this to a simmer. Once you have some nice bubbling going, we're going to let this simmer, stirring occasionally for like 5 to 10 minutes. All right, once this is simmered, we're going to turn down the heat. And I am going to grab my immersion blender now. I love this tool. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can puree this in batches in a blender instead. But I have this, so I'm going to go ahead and let it stop bubbling a little bit more. And I am going to puree this soup until it is completely smooth. I love this blender. I use it for so many recipes, like my apple butter, my potato soup. It's just very convenient. Another thing I will try to remember to link to in the description. All right, let's take a look at the consistency of this soup. This could be a little bit smoother. I like a smooth butternut squash soup. That looks better. Next, you will need a 14-ounce can of coconut milk. Now, I always start by just adding a cup of coconut milk, but hold on to the rest. And if I need a thinner soup, or if I am making one with more squash than is called for, like I am today, I may add more of the coconut milk just to thin it a little bit more and add a little bit more flavor. Always give this a good shake. And this isn't always smooth when you open it up, so I always like to pour it into a measuring cup, and you can see it's a little bit chunky. That's usually because of the temperature. But I want to make sure that I'm getting an even mix of the product. Like I don't just want to get like the watery layer on top of the coconut milk. I want to get a nice blend of all of the contents in the can. So shake it really well before you pour it, but also double check. So I have a cup of milk and I'm going to drizzle this in. And any lumps that might be in the coconut milk, they will melt right into the soup, so it's not a problem. And this is unsweetened coconut milk. It adds such a nice flavor to the soup. So I'll stir this in. It's also going to thin the soup a little bit more, and typically the next day I will reheat it with a splash of broth, just because it can thicken even more in the fridge. So once that cream is mixed in, now you want to taste test it. This is amazing, but if you need any other additions, feel free to add a little bit more salt. If the soup ever tastes even a little bit bland, it usually just needs a little bit more salt. Of course, if you like a stronger spice, feel free to add an extra dash of cinnamon or ginger as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pour myself a nice bowl of this. I usually enjoy the soup just like this, but you can drizzle it with additional cream, coconut milk I mean, or you could add roasted pepitas on top as well. Those are another great addition and they add some texture. All right, that is how you make butternut squash soup. If you try this one at home, please let me know how you like it. I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is seriously amazing. I can't wait for you to try it. You know, when you're using a knife, you really need to be able to see. Give me a minute. He was a good onion. He was just so young. And I'm going to turn my medium heat. Why would you dice it up and not dice it down?